The SWAC has officially crowned a champion. The Bulldogs of Alabama A&M are now the title holders. I was there to witness it. We talk all about it. Out of 259 picks, there were no players selected from historically black colleges and universities. What's going on with that? And Mamba and Mambasita now stand alone. No more Nike. We discuss that and more coming up right here on Fourth and Just. Welcome to Fourth and Just Us, everyone. Lericia Harris here alongside Professor Dr. Leonard Moore and the former athletic director himself, Kevin A.D. Anderson. We welcome you to another episode. Don't forget, you can like, comment, and subscribe. That means during the show, if you have any comments, any questions, make sure you drop them no matter what social or digital platform you are on. We want to hear from you, so make sure you leave a comment or also drop your questions. And it could be, again, on either Facebook Live. So if you're over there, make sure that you like our page. And if you're on YouTube, make sure you subscribe as well. We're going to get right into it today because we have a deep, deep show and an awesome guest joining us later on. But we want to talk about the SWAC championship. The Bulldogs of Alabama A&M defeated Arkansas Pine Bluff 40-33 in a game that went back and forth. I was there. I witnessed the action, and it was in Jackson, Mississippi, held at a neutral location for both of these schools. It was actually played where the Tigers at their home field. But again, the Bulldogs came out victorious. And AD Professor, I just want to know from you all's perspective, what does this added exposure mean for the SWAC now that they completely or successfully rather finished a season in the spring? What does it mean for the conference? Doc?
I don't know. I'm excited at a lot of the exposure the SWAC got. I mean, they were all on the major platforms. You know, those of us who follow HBCU football, you know, we're used to watching a tape delay game on at 10 or 11 o'clock at night. You know what I mean? It's nighttime, but, you know, then it's daytime during the game. And so it's just good to see the games being aired live. And Lericia, I want to give you props. You're a part of that crew on Saturday. You, Jay Walker, and Tiffany, the sister, doing play-by-play. So I think the SWAC got a lot of exposure this year, and hopefully it can carry on into the fall football season.
Lericia, Jay Walker should thank you because you carried him on Saturday. You know, I think this has given other people some things to think about. That do you have spring football? And I mean, does the SWAC have spring football and the exposure that they were able to get? And the only thing that I think that would hamper that is the use of facilities on each and every campus because of trying to have football and the spring sports. But I mean, I watched each and every game, and so I enjoyed it, and I saw a lot of great football. And I hope that somebody looks at it and says, you know, this might be something that we do in the future.
Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed watching a lot of the games this spring and being able to just see more HBCU football on a national stage, and it'd be seen by tons of people who probably have never even seen an HBCU game before. I think that is also a highlight and something that we should all be proud of in essence. But again, want to shout out the Bulldogs of Alabama A&M and head coach Connell Maynard for successfully pulling off this SWAC championship. And I think the highlight of the game for me was watching his Ric Flair celebration at the end. I'm not sure if you all saw my tweet that I put out, but I caught it on camera, and he did a great Ric Flair celebration at the end. So if you didn't see it, go check it out on Twitter. But speaking of HBCUs, right? After 259 picks, no player from a historically black college or university was selected in the 2021 NFL draft. What is going on with this? We saw that Washington football team advisor Doug Williams, who's actually a Grambling alum and also the first black quarterback to win a Super Bowl, say that it was hard for him to believe that not one guy was worthy of being drafted. even Jackson State head football coach and, of course, NFL Hall of Famer Deion Sanders came out and basically said that this particular move is neglecting and rejecting players from HBCUs. What were your feelings, AD, after you saw that no HBCU player was drafted this year?
Well, you have to question that. Just what we were talking about Saturday and some of the players that I saw on the field. I mean, there were some very talented football players. But the one thing that I'm looking at, and the silver lining is that in this is that any of these players now will be able to go to a team that they are more than likely to make rather than being drafted, because each and every one of these teams now are going to look for what do they need and what would be a great fit. Wow. So when you have this, when you're able to use this free agency, you know, you could pick and choose where you could go. And, you know, if most of these young men have people that are advising them correctly, they'll be able to look at the rosters and see, well, you know, I could probably make the team there. So there is a silver lining in this.
Yeah. I mean, Lericia, you know, it's tough. I mean, I think, you know, a lot of black talent has always been overlooked. You know what I mean? And so not surprised, but, you know, this is the 9th time this has happened since 2000, you know, that an HBCU player hasn't been drafted. You know, and I think, you know, we get into this HBCU PWI debate, and I think that's the one thing that will, I mean, the biggest roadblock to a lot of high profile men and women going to HBCUs, that they don't think, A, they'll get the exposure, but when they get the exposure, B, they'll think that, you know, they won't get seen because people will say they're playing inferior competition. And, you know, I think Trey Lance from North Dakota State, I think hopefully he blew that out of the water. You know, in North Dakota State, FBS school or something like FCS school rather, you know, they same class as the SWAC. So hopefully, you know, we can see some improvement for that for next year.
So,
Doc, could I just
go ahead, AD? Go ahead.
Yeah, because so my son's a junior going into the senior year in high school. And one of the things that we really are hoping is that he has a strong interest in going to Howard. Mm-hmm. And he probably has an opportunity to go to other places, but we want him to go to Howard, not only from an athletic point, but what he'll be able to experience. And Lericia, both you could speak to that. And I think him having that experience is far more valuable than him going to any other school.
Absolutely. I remember, Lericia, I went to a Morehouse game, and I laugh at Morehouse's stadium. You know, my son said, Daddy, our middle school stadium is bigger than, because at Morehouse, you only can sit on one side of the field. But I remember going to a Morehouse game, Lericia, and, you know, people were tailgating around the stadium. The Morehouse players didn't even change out of their uniform. They took their helmet and their shoulder pads off, and they were just milling around with folks. And I said, that is what college football is supposed to be about. So I think people, brothers and sisters who go to HBCUs, have a much more holistic, much more well-rounded experience than going to a larger football or volleyball or basketball factory.
It's definitely an intimate setting, and to be able to learn and see and be around, you know, those who look like you, who have similar upbringings, who have had similar experiences, it touches you in a different way. And as a person who had the opportunity to actually, you know, experience both, coming from a high school that was predominantly white, going into an HBCU, and then going from an HBCU over to a PWI for my master's, I was able to, you know, see the differences at each level, or at the different places that I was able to attend. But I can say my time at an HBCU was everything. And I highly recommend it. It was just something special and something intimate that can never be taken away from that particular aspect at all. Want to move on now to a story we talked about here. No more Nike. Vanessa Bryant confirmed that Kobe's 5-year post-retirement endorsement extension with Nike expired on April 13th. She made this statement on social media and said that she and his estate elected to not renew the partnership. This was on her Instagram story, and she explained that although the endorsement has ended, she would continue to fight to allow the fans to wear her late husband's product. So with this move, what would you say is the significance of it, AD?
I think we're looking at this as that when we've been talking about this NIL, that she's looking now at being able to go and branch and make her own deal and not have to share with the middleman. So I think that with the power and the strength of his brand, and now her daughter's brand, I think that, she could go out there and do quite well for her family in pursuing this.
And let me say this really quickly, Doc, before you come in and make your point about it. According to ESPN, it said it is believed that all future releases of Kobe branded products from Nike will stop. However, the Kobe Bryant estate is free to negotiate a new partnership with other brands as it owns the rights to both the Mamba logo and his signature.
I mean, that's amazing, and I'm happy for the Bryant family. You see, y'all was laughing at LeVar Ball, you know what I mean? When he tried to get his own shoes, y'all was laughing at him. And my critique is, Lericia, the Black community has this unhealthy devotion to Nike. What has Nike ever done in the Black community? I mean, have they put up a community center? Have they provided scholarships? What have they done? I remember when the Air Jordans came out in 1984, the Tuesday after the All-Star game. Me and my dad went to Foot Locker and I said, Dad, I want those. He looked at the price tag, $64.99. He said, that ain't happening. I had to settle for the canvas versions of those. They were called Air Jordan knockouts. Here is my point. The shoes have gotten so exorbitantly high. And before, Rich, they would come out with one pair of shoe. Now they come out with a new release almost every week. So the pair you get on Monday become old the next Monday. And I just think we need to, begin to re-examine our relationship. I always ask my students at LSU in Texas, hey, if you have an opportunity to get a shoe deal and Nike is paying X, but Shaqs are paying 3 times what Nike gonna pay to endorse the shoe, will you sign with Shaq? They like, Doc, hell no, I ain't wearing no Shaqs. Hey, don't laugh at Shaq. Them shoes, Shaq has sold a lot of shoes at Payless and at Walmart. And what I appreciate Shaq for is that those shoes, I believe, have never cost more than like $14.99 or $15.99. So I'm happy for the Bryant family getting something for themselves.
Chuck Taylors used to cost $10, $12. Now, y'all know what Chuck Taylors are?
Yes.
Yeah.
So anyway, so now Chuck Taylors are going, what, 30, 35, and Shaq's shoes are $14. I mean, where's this thing? Where is it and where is it going?
Yeah, them Chuck Taylors cost more than that.
I was about to say, AD, some of those Converses cost a little more than that. I spent like $100 on some Converses not too long ago.
You spent $100 on some Chuck Taylors?
They are the new platform. It has like the gumdrop bottom. Those who are aware the new platform sort of Chuck Taylors or Converses know what I'm talking about. But they are like the platform ones, and they have like this brown bubblegum looking bottom, and it's white and black. I'm trying to explain it. Hopefully, just Google platform Converses, and you'll be able to see what I'm talking about.
Are you a sneakerologist?
I wouldn't consider myself a sneakerologist, but I am a amateur sneakerhead.
Oh, got you. Okay.
I am an amateur at it, but I'm also a realistic person, and I know that I am not going to put all of my money in sneakers. I can't do it. I can't do it at all.
I'm blown away because the young brothers now, when they wearing J's or something, they walk flat-footed, like they got on clogs. I'm like, why are you walking like that? Because they don't want to get creases in the shoes. I'm like, man, y'all creases. Crazy.
You can't get creases in the new Jordans or in your fresh Air Force Ones. So if you see someone,
I told him I'm 50 years old. Whatever shoes I buy, I'm gonna wear. I don't care about creases running. I'm gonna wear them.
No, Doc, you gotta walk slew-footed. Do a little duck walk so you don't get no creases in there. Moving on to our favorite segment of the show. Well, one of our favorite segments. We have so many favorites on this show. Who put raisins in the potato salad?
Keep your brand ass potato salad to yourself.
Now, all of you out there, please listen and listen carefully. Family-owned restaurants around the U.S. are struggling to keep a steady supply of chicken tenders, chicken wings, chicken breasts on their customers' plates, all due to a nationwide poultry shortage. The consumer demand for the bird has surged amid the coronavirus, with Americans turning to comfort foods and buying more chicken from various fast food locations. Why
Oh, hell
are
nah,
you
Karen.
all buying so much chicken? When you heard about this, Doc, what did you think?
You know, I live in Austin, Texas, Lericia. We call this the white folks Atlanta. So we don't have no shortage down here. So we it's all white folks, so we good. They ain't eating chicken like y'all are in Atlanta and LA and all that. So we good down here.
Wait, are
Hey,
they
just
really
as long
eating
as
chicken in LA?
oh yeah,
Are they
so
eating
you know
chicken in LA?
we got Popeyes. Best chicken sandwich of them all is Popeyes. So yeah, we're
Oh, hell nah,
still
Karen.
eating there. Hey, but wait a minute. Nobody acknowledged that I picked the Kentucky Derby winner. Medea won. You saw that? Medea won.
Oh, hell nah, Karen.
You know what? Maybe we should have took you up on that particular offer there, Kevin, because you were right. You were right. But it's okay. We'll listen next time. But I just need all of you all to stop eating all the chicken, okay? Stop eating all the chicken. Today's topic, right, is a very deep and thorough conversation that we are prepared to have. And again, we have a great guest that will be joining us here shortly to help us be able to further this conversation. Mental health in the Black community, particularly around the Black student athlete. And we recently saw that a former NFL player killed 6 people, then himself, in South Carolina. Former NFL player Phillip Adams was a gunman, 32 years old, played in 78 NFL games over 5 seasons for 6 teams. And unfortunately, he was the gunman who killed the 6 people, then himself. And after looking at various news outlets, it is stated that his father told a Charlotte television station that he blamed football for his problems, and that may have led to his son to commit such an act of violence. His mother was disabled. They also brought that into the mixture of potential problems that maybe Phillip was facing or trying to deal with. And then even his agent made a statement saying that the gunman often isolated himself and said that he was a great guy and that this particular situation is so unlike him, he had to not be in his right mind, obviously. So, AD, when you hear stories like this, what is the first thing that comes to mind and how does it make you feel?
So when we bring these young people to campus, the first thing that we should have support systems for them. I mean, all these kids, it doesn't matter what color they are, they're all coming from different situations and different communities, and then we're putting them all together. So there needs to be an extension of counseling and help just to make the adjustment. But then if we look at the African-American student athlete, I mean, we're bringing some of these kids in from much different circumstances, and that adjustment period is even so much more challenging and in some places difficult. So, you know, if we're going to commit ourselves to educating and having these young people play on our campuses, then we need to do more for them. And, you know, if you understand and if you're doing your job and you're communicating and you're having relationships with these young people, you should be able to identify most of the time if somebody's struggling. So if we don't see the struggle, then that means we're not aware, we're not connected with the students that we're bringing on our campuses.
Doc, as it pertains to this particular incident surrounding this former NFL player, what does it say about mental health and the Black athlete?
I mean, Lericia, I always get worried, you know, when the dream is up, you know what I mean? And you think about somebody, a sister who plays basketball at Tennessee or UConn or, you know, softball at Michigan or something like that. You know, that sister has probably been the best, at one of the best in the country, you know, for a great deal of her life. And, you know, think about the brother playing football or basketball. And now at 22, 23, or even 28, Lericia, when it's over, there's some significant depression that sets in. And, you know, when I was, you know, when I used to be much more engaged in the daily lives of Black athletes, particularly at LSU in my first 5 or 6 years here at Texas, Lericia, I always knew when NFL cut day was. You know why? Because typically a day or two after that, my phone would ring or I get a text or an email from a former player who got cut, wants to come back to school. Doc, can I help him get back to school? Now, here's the interesting thing. The kids were calling me as a professor because they understood, by and large, that when their eligibility is up, the athletic department had moved on. Nothing personal. The athletic department had moved on to the next class of students. And so it was a time for me, man, where I'm in my office just praying for brothers. You know what I mean? Because the loss of identity, the loss of status, and in many ways, they lost all sense of who they were. So that can be a very, very dramatic decline, just in their emotional stability. When they imagine that you get drafted or you making it, or you're in a camp NFL team and you get cut, and you got to go back home. Did you see at the draft? A lot of those young men had these large draft parties, 20, 30 people in the background. What happens to that kid if it doesn't work out? And how does the relationship change between that kid, not only his family, but also extended family and friends? So it's just tough, Lericia, when the gig is up for a lot of these young people.
Yeah, you guys bring in so many just ideas surrounding mental health in the Black athlete. Our guest is here, and we want to bring him in because he will definitely help us to be able to elaborate and go a little deeper in this conversation. So we would like to welcome in our guest, Dr. Ryan Sutton, who is a two-time HBCU graduate, having received his bachelor's from Xavier University in Louisiana and his master's and PhD from Howard University in counseling psychology. Welcome, Dr. Ryan Sutton. We
thank you for having me.
Yes.
Thank you for having me, and love being here.
Yes. So you hear the conversations that we've been having thus far. We talked about the incident with the former NFL player, Phillip Adams. AD and Doc just mentioned topics surrounding student athletes as it pertains to whether the dream was deferred or is it delayed. Let's just start from the beginning, right? As it pertains to mental health and the Black community in general. There is a stigma that exists. Why is that stigma there?
That's a great question. I think that's a question that we don't ask ourselves too often. I think a lot of times we'll get to beating up on the Black community for having the stigma without trying to understand why that stigma exists. And when you look at the field of mental health in the Black community, you really see a tumultuous relationship from the beginning, right? We could talk about Benjamin Rush, the father of psychiatry, signer of Declaration of Independence, was against slavery, but created the disease of negritude. You think you look at diseases like drapetomania, about when the slave ran away, you got hit with a mental health disease because you didn't fold into the system. So when you look at a Black community who often gets stigmatized for not fitting into a system that continuously oppresses them and makes them the issue, then yeah, you're going to have a community that doesn't trust that system to engage with them. So at the end of the day, don't go air our dirty laundry. Don't go talking to somebody out on the street who won't understand what we're going through. At best, let's go up the street to the church and talk to the pastor, or keep it in the family, right? But, historically, we don't go out and do that. We don't go out and talk about these things.
I mean, you talk about the role of the Black church, Ryan, and I know growing up, we would always say a person had demons or something like that. And we just try to pray it out of them. You've done a lot of work with churches around the area of mental health. What do you suggest for the faith community? Because it's still a stigma, man. It's still, I was talking to Lericia and Kevin the other day, how a lot of us either had an extended family member, or friend's family member who had mental health issues. They would just be in their room all day with the TV on and you never saw them. You know what I mean? Right. So what are some approaches, man, that you've been trying to work with the Black community to get us to open up more and get treated for mental health issues?
Now, I think the Black church is one of the first places that we could go in and do some education around mental health, right? That's a place where our community goes, that our community trusts, right? So if you start having increase in mental health literacy, when you start having kind of first aid response training, when you start having these conversations in the church setting, and also focus around what does your faith say about this from a real sense, right? Because right about now we have a lot of professionals. I'm not gonna say a lot. We have professionals who are in the mental health space and in the church space who bridge these two together that have been divided for so long. But I think when we start having more of these initiatives within the church, you start having a lot of ministries within the church that actually speak to the mental health and addressing it. When you get pastors that can preach from a pulpit or kind of put a a voice, the language behind the experience, then I think that significantly helps in destigmatizing it within the families, within the communities, and making it more manageable for people to talk about.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I want to talk about just the culture of athletics in general, right? We heard the story again about Phillip Adams. We talked a little bit about what it takes once an athlete is actually in school. They're a part of a team. They are making their way through, their journey through college, but also being a student athlete, playing the sport, whether it's, with a good coach, bad coach, whatever it might be. They have to get adjusted to everything that's taking place, right? Sometimes you have coaches who are yelling and who are cursing. Sometimes you have other coaches who have other ways of manipulating some student athletes. And then you do have great coaches out there as well. But is the culture of sports in general, is it good for the mental health of the student athlete?
I think there's another stigma when we start talking about sports and athletics, right? There's the stigma around mental health within the field of athletics, where you got to be tough-minded. You have to be more present mentally. You can't be weak. You can't be soft, right? So when you get yelled at, you're weak, you're soft. That's going to send a message that this is not a place for you. So not only do you have the stigma within the Black community that you grew up in, now you overlay that with the stigma within athletics, the stigma within the culture of sport that gets compounded on top of that. And now you have two stigmas that are preventing you from recognizing your experience, from talking about your experience, or for you to even reach out and ask for help in the experience. So when you couple that with the fact that these are young men and women, these are young men and women who may not have built up the ego strength to even handle half of the language and behaviors that are coming from coaches or maybe administration or whoever it may be coming from, that continues to beat down their own self-concept and self-identity, right? So I think a big thing of what we're seeing is also the development of a lot of young folk who don't have the ego strength to withstand the obstacles, the challenges, the pressures that are put on them, and they end up decompensating out of that. So things get worse. We start seeing the self-medication. We start seeing, drug use. We start seeing isolation and seclusion. And unfortunately, when it grows too much, we see cases like Florida and South Carolina where it goes even way too far.
Wow. Yeah.
Well, hey, Doc Sutton, but there is a cure to that. And now the coaches are going to be responsible for forming relationships, because if not, they're going to find somebody in the transfer portal. If you look at that Syracuse women's basketball team, they're all leaving. So now someone's going to have to ask the question, why are these young ladies leaving? And if you point the finger back at where it's coming from, it has to be the coach.
Right.
I mean, when you have an entire team leave, then there's something that you need to realize that you're not doing as an adult to work with these young people and have them want to stay and not leave. So, but go ahead.
That's a great point, because even to that point about ego strength, I think some of these coaches don't have the ego strength to deal with it.
Wow.
So they can't look at their own contributions to the situations. They don't have the ego strength to deal with the challenges, and now they off put their responsibility somewhere else. So, I think it's going to continually move up the chain. And are they going to get held responsible by the AD, by the president of the university, or by whoever else to have things in order?
Is that tied directly into the identity piece that you were talking about, Dr. Sutton?
I think it is. I think it's very much tied into that identity piece, because for so long for our student athletes, and I think, Risha, you mentioned this earlier, right? From the ages of 6, 7, and 8, you're being sold, you're a great athlete, you're a tremendous athlete, the league is for you. And now you have 18, 19, 20 years of experience being reinforced that this is the direction you should go in, right? I look at myself, I ran track and cross country in college, but I went to college thinking I was going to be a pediatrician. And at the end of my first year, when I had that 1.5 GPA and came home to a letter that says you ain't got to go home, but you got to get out of here, I didn't have the same type of identity foreclosure that these athletes face, because I wasn't told from 6, 7, and 8 years old that I was going to be a great pediatrician. So when it didn't come through, where it fell apart, I wasn't fine. I had to do some struggling to figure out what I was going to do. But it's not the same when you've been told for so long, this is your identity. And for those coaches, that identity foreclosure didn't end when they stopped playing, if they even played at all. But they're still in that process now. So, I think all of this goes back to this identity. If you don't have the identity outside of athletics, do you have the wherewithal to not lose yourself when things go awry?
Ryan, let me ask you this. I was talking to, because a lot of this stuff goes on at the pro level. I think we tend to think just because they're getting the paycheck at the pro level, the problems aren't as severe. They are worse. I remember I had a former student, conscious brother, like to read a lot of Black history. He said that these coaches, even in the NBA, will be playing all these mind games. You know what I mean? And he couldn't believe it, but he felt that it was a constant battle for his mind, that they didn't want him to be focused on anything else, right? Other than performing. He said he would always go to the back of the plane. He's reading a book or something like that. And he said he knew that an assistant coach would come back there and be like, man, what are you reading? So why do we think it's different at the pro level than the college level? Why do we have that assumption that, those guys are pros, they're getting paid, there are no psychological issues there?
Well, first of all, I don't know if it's that much different from the D1 level, where we have this idea that, you're a D1 athlete, you had it set for you, and they don't see the behind the scenes ins and outs of what goes into that. But one, I think it's our culture, our society, that paints a picture of what it means to be in the league, what it means to be playing professional, or what it means to be playing at the D1 level. Football, basketball, revenue generating sport. So I think when we have this image that's painted for us, that's what people gravitate to. And I think to a large degree, that's what a lot of students gravitate to when they're pursuing this avenue, right? They think that this will be almost like a panacea, a fix-all for whatever I have going on. Once I have this, I'll be straight. And what happens is they find out that sexiness that's been painted around this arena has kind of dissipated, probably by their second year in college. They realize this is a business. This isn't what I was sold. It's something different. And now I have to try to make sense of it. But I think for the surrounding people, right, we still gravitate to this sexy image that's painted.
Let me do a quick follow-up while we're on this point before we move on. A few years ago, the NFL Players Association invited me to come and talk to a bunch of guys. The word they were using said they were in transition. Translation, those guys were got cut. They didn't have any, their league prospects were over. So I go up there. The event was like on a Thursday morning. Wednesday night, y'all, they had like a little happy hour. And so none of the guys knew who I was. So we had this little happy hour at the hotel with some pool tables and stuff. So I walk in, brothers mean mugging me, brothers not speaking. Now, I knew who they were. They didn't know who I were, and they weren't even speaking. Just like mean mugging me, giving me the cold shoulder, that kind of stuff. The next morning, it was 80 brothers in that room, and Dr. Sutton, they were all broken. All of them were completely broken. Brothers in there crying, brothers in there talking about, I don't know what my next move is going to be. But I just contrasting how they were the night before, you know what I'm saying? With how they were in many ways, 12 hours later, it just blew me completely away that these grown men with all this bravado and all that were completely broken on the inside because the gig was up.
Yeah, that pseudo sense of confidence, I think, is one of those barriers we put up to not be seen. If I could put this up, then I won't get found out. If I could put this up, I could keep portraying the image that I'm supposed to be portraying, right? And I keep people at bay. And I think that's what also goes into the fact that we don't get help. We don't ask for it. It may be hard to identify it because we say we don't need it. I'm fine. I could push through it. I could man up, whatever else you want to throw around that. And we're struggling.
Hey, Ryan, that leads us into this. I had the opportunity to sit down with you many years ago, and we were talking about suicide amongst Black people. And particularly, we were looking at young Black males. You showed me a survey that you provided just people in basic questions. And then you broke it down and you had something that addressed young Black males. Could you share with that and how that discovery it blew my mind? Could you talk about that?
Yeah, so I was looking at a few college athletes, D1 college athletes, and looking at identity, racial identity, athletic identity, and mental health status using an M3, right? So it looks at various mental health diagnoses, but then an overall well-being. And one of the things that came out there was the elevated rates at which, Black men and women, student athletes, were reporting struggling with various aspects of depression, or anxiety or bipolar. And even to some degree, right, the endorsement on the suicide factor of I've thought about suicide within the past 12 months. And that was being endorsed at levels of, highly agree with this or somewhat agree with this. So it's there. And at the end of the day, we also understand that when we see those numbers, they're also deflated because of the stigma that comes with being in the Black community, the stigma that becomes with being in athletics. We're not reporting out the same way we should. So to see elevated numbers of individuals identifying people without diagnoses, right? These are people without diagnoses indicating here are symptomology, so to say, that I'm struggling with on a daily basis. It's there and no one's identifying it. When I talk to student athletes, wherever I go, what typically happens is after I'm done, a line forms up around the room, and one at a time, I hear some iteration of, I'm struggling and I don't know how to talk to my coach. My teammates are struggling. I see it in the locker room and I don't know how to speak up or what to do with that. Or I need help and I don't know where to go. Yes, the athletic department has counselors and mental health, but I don't know if I could trust them. They're part of that system. Yes, the university has a counseling center, but I'm a top tier athlete. If I go in there, they're going to snap a picture of me and I'm going to end up on someone's front page that I'm struggling with mental health. And does my draft stock go down because of that? Does my playing time come down because of that? Do I lose my spot because I've now admitted that I'm struggling and now being seen as weak? So therefore, I just rather suffer in silence and self-medicate even.
Wow.
So Ryan, can you talk about the questionnaire you came up with and how the language that when you first experienced this questionnaire, it was just generic. And once you broke it down and you put it into common terms that these young Black folk could relate to, the differences that you've seen and how they responded to them. And, the first questionnaire was like, but once you broke it down, you saw a whole different product. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah, the questionnaires I use, I didn't come up with them. I used, the CHRIS, the AIMS, and the M3, a racial identity scale, a athletic identity scale, and a mental health scale. But when I talk to the players, what I typically do is I come off of diagnoses. Because the minute you come into Black folk and say depression, they say, I do not claim that in Jesus' name. Like, you're not about to put me in that camp. Like, anxiety, nah, not me. That's them, but not me. But the minute I step back and say, how many of y'all had trouble sleeping last night? Couldn't go to sleep because stuff on your mind. Had trouble waking up in the night, middle of the night, and couldn't go back to sleep. How many of y'all have low appetite or high appetite? When I start breaking down the functionality or the symptoms of what goes into this, oh, that's me, or I do relate to that. How many of y'all are easily irritable, just always on edge? Oh yeah, that's me. They can start bringing themselves to discussion. So typically when I work with student athletes, I get rid of the diagnosis. I get rid of all that language that, what are they going to do with that anyway? And I start talking about how are you functioning? How do you feel? Because what athletes are trained, they are trained very well in paying attention to their body. Athletes are trained very well in understanding what is going on with me, what's going on with my body, and what do I need. So tap into that and get them to understand what are the changes that you're feeling within your emotions, within your thoughts, within your behaviors. And that's something I can link onto. That's something tangible I can hold on to. And I think that's what gets them talking a little bit more and gravitating like, oh, can we talk further? I think there's something there.
Yeah.
Dr. Sutton, are you one who utilizes the feelings wheel?
I will utilize it in order to get the language there for them. I'm not one of those psychologists that are kind of like, and how does that make you feel? That's not me. But a lot of times we haven't given the language to speak life to our to what we're experiencing. So a lot of times, let's talk about just Black males. We'll go to I'm happy and I'm angry. I'm happy and I'm pissed, but you can break that down in so many different ways. I can't do anything with that, but getting them to using that language wheel, that feelings wheel, helps them put more language behind what they're actually experiencing. And I think sometimes it's a good jumping off point once you get them to that place. But the minute you bust out with a feelings wheel, most people are like, yeah, nah, I ain't fooling with it.
See, I only asked that question because I am one who actually goes to counseling, and that was something that was introduced to me, and just being able to know how to accurately describe where you are in the present moment. And I don't think I ever really took the time to really understand how important that is. And it doesn't mean that you necessarily have to be upset or that something has to be
Right.
wrong. It's just truly being able to describe how you are in that present moment. Like, if you're happy, are you smiling? Or if you're a little, frustrated, is your jaw tense? Like all these small little subtle details that can help you be able to accurately communicate and describe where you are in that present moment. So that's why
And, and a
inquiring.
lot of times we have to do work to get people there to even be comfortable with that. Because
Right.
when you get the feelings on those wheels, like hurt, nobody wants to sit there and be like, I'm hurt, I'm disappointed. Or
Yeah.
sometimes it's not even cool to be that excited. I'm not joyous. I'm just cool. I'm good.
Yeah.
So that feelings will goes a long way. Yep.
But Dr. Sutton, didn't you say though that one of the reasons why we avoid a lot of mental health conversations is because for so long we've had to be strong. You've had to, you know what I'm saying? That psychic armor, we've had to wear that just to survive. Right now, I don't believe. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Doc.
No, go ahead. Finish that.
I mean, I was watching this. It wasn't Charlemagne the God. It's the other show, Ebro in the Morning. He was talking about being a black man. He said, nobody cares how you as a black man feel. You either get it done or you don't. And so even me, man, as a brother, I've never had counseling before. I got a couple brothers I call, you know what I'm saying, when I need some advice. But but nobody cares how we feel, Dr. Sutton. We just got to get it done because that's society. That is the pressure in many ways that is placed on us. So how do we balance that?
But can I say that though, as a black woman, that's the stigma or the perception that I know that I'm trying to help change, because I think it is important for us to acknowledge the feelings of a black man, because there is so much, I don't want to say unnecessary, but so much extra pressure that is already there, whether it's known, whether it's spoken or not spoken, it's already there. It's already present.
Yeah, I agree with that. I would say that to that same degree, that means we bought into what's been sold to us. We bought into the matter of this John Henryism, put your head down, work harder, work faster at, whatever expense to your mind, to your body, to your relationships. So this whole idea of I don't care how you feel, just get it done. We have to even break apart what does it mean to get it done, right? I think we've put everything into such a ball and just compounded everything together that we don't understand that in getting it done, we're hurting ourselves. In getting it done, we're hurting in our relationships. In getting it done, that we're hurting in a lot of different ways. And the allostatic wear, or how we're kind of how it's weighing on our bodies, right? It's just kind of shortening our lifespans. It's making us more isolated in our relationships. So I think what we have to do now is start spinning the mental health conversation in a way that is palatable for a lot of us. Because for so long, it has been just get it done. Don't speak on these things. When I watch my dad do it, when I watch my grandfather do it, this is just how they do it. But to what end are we going to stop that cycle?
For sure. And I think this actually leads us into the conversation of, for Black athletes, when your time is done, whether you want it to be or not, that transition for some people is difficult. And sometimes we see the various incidences, such as the one we mentioned at the top of this conversation, including former players like Phillip Adams and that unfortunate situation. Or we even see the side of it where the outcome is domestic violence. What is your take on that step of it, when again there is no more ball, like it's done for, your time has come to an end? How is that transition? How have you seen that?
I agree with Doc, where the people that I've seen who may not have gotten drafted, may had a medical cut, career comes to an end, and not on the grounds in which they were expecting or hoping it would. There's a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety, a lot of anger that rests there. But I think a few things we have to realize. One, when we start seeing these behaviors come out, we can't immediately say, I'm going to excuse this from the mental health conversation, because the mental health conversation is just an excuse. And I think a lot of times what we'll say is, when you start talking about mental health, that's an excuse for what's going on. They know better. They should just do it. They should just do right. And we really simplify what they're going through. So that's one, we have to kind of rid that from our minds in order to be present for the conversation. Two, I think we have to start understanding, because most people don't understand what mental health is. I think a lot of us have these kind of old thoughts or ideas about what mental health looks like. Somebody laying on the couch with some dude that looks like Sigmund Freud with a pipe in his mouth, you know, talking about mother issues. That doesn't fit here. That's never fit here, right? So when we start understanding what exactly mental health is, and from a functional behavioral aspect, how does it include me? I think that's one of the first steps we have to do. Can you bring your own self to this conversation? Because if you can't even humanize yourself, you're not going to be able to humanize anybody else. So that would be two.
But Doc, it goes back to, and what you were inferring to is that many of us grew up and we can't allow ourselves to be vulnerable. Because if we start admitting that we have issues and start talking about them, then, you know, wow, you know, we've never dealt with that before. And I mean, growing up, I'll tell you, my house, I mean, my father wasn't going to go. If I told him that I was having, he would have hit me on the back of the head, said, shut up, go on and do what you need to do. So, you know, that's what we're dealing with. And we talked about that earlier when, you know, you go to the cookout and you got Uncle Johnny there and everybody's saying, well, you know, Uncle Johnny's a little special and, you know, we just leave him alone and we won't talk about what's his deal. And then, I mean, it just snowballs from there. So how do we just begin to deal with this?
Well, AD, part of the reason why that happens is because people feel like they're being implicated when their, you know, family member has an issue. I think a lot of times with kids, you know, kid speaks up and depressed, anxiety, the parent immediately feels you saying I did something wrong. Yeah. So immediately it's turned back on the parent. Similar to the coaches and athletic department. If the student athlete is struggling, are you saying that's on me? That's not on me. One of the biggest things I've seen doing assessments with youth in the juvenile justice system or in schools, the minute I interview mom or dad or big mom or whoever, and I start going back to birth, going back to 2 or 3, whoa, we're not here about me. Leave me out of it, right? But you are a part of this. You do have a part of this. So we have to start understanding and educating people how we are, in a way, if you want to use that word, implicated in the health of those around us as well as our own health. And I think a lot of that's going to go back to education and kind of breaking the stereotypes of what mental health has historically looked like.
For sure. I like to look at it as generational patterns. You have to know certain things that happened previously because some of those consequences or those after effects kind of linger over into where you currently are. But I want to.
And we have the data that says that goes back to utero.
Yeah.
It goes back to utero. So, you know, we have to go all the way back if we're trying to understand somebody's experience.
For sure. I want us to move into the conversation of solutions now, right? And in order for us to make that next step and get this this conversation started more and looked at in a different way. And one of the reasons why we wanted to have this discussion with you, Dr. Sutton, because May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And so it was important for us to make sure that we talk about this because it is something that we've all personally seen from our various everyday experiences and occupations as well. So as it pertains to understanding, right, with the student athlete or with the Black athlete, what would you say, or why would you say it's important for it to be known the difference between a sports psychologist and a clinical psychologist? I think that's a part of the solution conversation as well.
Yeah, that's a great question. When I talk to athletic programs and I ask if they have mental health professionals on staff, the immediately thing is like, yeah, we have a sports psychologist, which is not a bad thing. It's a good thing to have. However, one thing that we have to understand is that a lot of times sports psychology is positioned within performance enhancement. I'm here to enhance your performance on the field, on the court, or what have you. That's what I'm here for. Yes, there will be some blending of clinical issues, of mental health issues that are beyond sport, but my ultimate goal is performance enhancement in order to get those W's, right? I think the field is changing. I think the conversation in sports psychology is changing over, but that's still in a process that might take some time. When you have the clinical psychologist who's familiar and works with athletes, then you have somebody who's willing to understand the mental health problems that's being experienced, yes, maybe on the court or on the field, but also off the court. We're looking at identity issues. We're looking at, exploring what's life after sports. What are the relationships at home? What are these other things that's impacting your day-to-day functioning just as a young person and not just a student athlete with those wins. So I think it's important to break that down and understand, yes, it's great to have the sports psychologists on staff, but you need to make sure that you have maybe some clinical psychologists on staff, LPCs, LCSWs, licensed clinical social workers, some mental health people that are there, not necessarily focused on just performance enhancement.
So what's going on a lot of our campuses, though, is that these sports performance people, first of all, a lot of them don't even have licenses, degrees, or whatever it takes. And then I had at one school, I probably had 12 different people dealing with 12 different teams. And, you know, none of them were doing the exact same thing. And then to compound things, they didn't understand what these Black kids were bringing to campus. So if you don't even realize that, and then you have everything else going on, and I mean, I would be safe to say that this happens at the majority of our campuses, that we have these Black kids on campus, and we don't have people that understand how to deal with them, what to ask, and then how to help them through what's going on. So I mean, it's a much bigger deal than we're even talking about.
And that's a great point, AD, because that's compounded. Because even with the non-student athletes I deal with on campus, the Black non-student athletes, they'll say, I can't go to the counseling center because they're not culturally proficient up there and don't understand what's going on. But for a Black student athlete, you got no cultural proficiency and you might not understand the athletic culture. Now I'm really lost. Yeah. Right? So if I stay in the shop, they don't understand culture. If I go over there, they don't understand the other culture. Where do I turn?
But I think the other piece, though, Dr. Sutton, is that, you know, a lot of student athletes will complain about, you know, yeah, the coach, they want me to go see the psychologist, but I'm not going to tell them nothing because the minute I leave the office, they're going to go back and tell the coach what we talked about. Isn't that violation of some kind of agreement that y'all have as professionals?
Yep, confidentiality agreement. But here's the kicker, and I completely understand the apprehension they have. Before I came to UT, I worked at DC Superior Court, you know, doing psychological assessments. When I had somebody walk in the office, they look at me and say, are you the judge? Are you the attorney? Are you the prosecutor? I just know you're part of the system. So can I even trust you? That's no different from the athletic department. When you walk in and you know that they were contracted by, you have to ask yourself, who's the client? Is it the athletic department or is it me? Because in the court system, it's not the person sitting in front of you. It's the person who contracted with you. So, you know, I don't think it's out the box for a student athlete to say, I'm very apprehensive about this because I don't know the relationship there. And a lot of times they want to find somebody on their own. So when I get hit up, it's how do I tap into resources on my own? How can I find resources in the community on my own? Because I feel much better doing that. And then trying to navigate and help them understand what that process looks like and what it looks like to even identify a psychologist. Most people don't even know what it means to kind of shop around for a psychologist, right? It's a very taboo topic. So I agree with you, Doc, that a lot of them don't trust in-house. So how do you get out of house in order to get the services they need?
Are there a few pointers that you can give to anyone listening who might be in that stage or might have come to the understanding or reasoning like, hey, I need to shop around for someone? What should I look for in a person who might be a good fit for me?
Yeah, so first of all, I would say, man, if you have insurance, go to the insurance providers and see who's all on that roster and take a look at just to get exposed to what options are out there. Number two, if you don't have insurance, because we know health equity, lack of insurance, underinsured, we talk about maybe some students who may or may not have something to cover. There's something called a sliding fee scale, which is kind of pay what you can in order to, you know, get the services that you need, and they'll adjust those rates based on that. Number two, I'd say shop around. Just because you linked up with somebody the first time doesn't mean you're committed to them, right? You know, I laugh. I think about it like dating. You ain't trying to get married off the first date. You know, you could go out once and talk and go out twice and talk to see if y'all really vibe. And then number three, I see, you know, do you have the comfortability in talking with them? Do you feel like you could connect with them? Do you feel like they have the style that you relate to that's helping you out? And do they deal with the issues that you're bringing to the table? So, you know, be able to ask the hard questions, interview them when you're in that space. You hold the power. I think a lot of times we think the mental health professional holds the power, but you hold the power in the room. They're vying for your job. So ask all those questions, price them out, and see if there's a synergy or flow, a comfortability in connecting with them, and use those as some jumping off points.
Dr. Sutton, we greatly appreciate you joining us for this conversation. One more thing here before we give our final thoughts and prepare to wrap the show. What is it that we need to do as a community, right? To normalize this conversation, in essence, to normalize and say that talking about your feelings or talking about mental illness or mental health in general, it's okay.
Yeah, I think we need more transparency and vulnerability in our relationships, right? Around the house, around the dinner table, at school, when you're trying to teach social emotional awareness and emotional intelligence, having that openness and vulnerability there to demonstrate and model what it looks like, because we have a lot of youth coming up who've never seen it. So we have to model it for them to see it. And I think once they model it and see it, they'll start doing that. And once we start doing that, then we can engage in those discussions, because I think what's going to happen off of that, we're going to get a lot more youth who are developing the ego strength to withstand what life's going to throw at them. And we might have student athletes that's not going to put up with coaches yelling and hitting and cursing at them, because they have the ego strength to say, I'm not dealing with that. Peace out. Or I'm more than this. So, I'm not locked in here. So I think when we start doing that and having those conversations, we free people up to start understanding who they are and what they bring to the table.
Dr. Sutton, we greatly appreciate you joining us here on Fourth and Just Us to have this conversation about mental health and the Black athlete. Dr. Sutton, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan.
Thanks, Doc.
That was such a powerful conversation, y'all. We can talk and go on and on and on about those about that specific topic, rather. But want to hear from you all, Doc. Same question that I posed Dr. Sutton. How do we normalize this conversation?
I don't know. It's not easy. And as a Black man, Lericia, I got a lot of pride. I had a family member who got on some medication about a few months ago, and this family member probably should have been on it earlier than that. But I got to admit, I was prideful. I'm like, no, they don't need it. They'll be okay. There's nothing wrong with them. But it's my pride, and I had to get out of my pride, and it has worked out. But I think that the long history of the medical establishment, using Black people like guinea pigs, Tuskegee was just a small footnote in that story. That still sticks with me. It still sticks with me. So I got some work to do on my own. So I gotta be more comfortable, having these conversations.
Mm-hmm. AD?
Hey, Doc, I think you said the key word, being comfortable.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I might come up and, one of my partners or whatever, hey man, I love you. And you can see that they're uncomfortable with that. And they're looking at me like, so where are you coming from? But
when you told me that, I was uncomfortable.
Yeah. So, it's taken me a long time to be able to share those emotions and those feelings and tell somebody, how I truly feel. And I think we need to do a better job of that. And these young people need to see that it's okay to express yourself. And once you do that, then I think it helps free who you truly are.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think too, we have to make it known and let it be known that it is okay for the Black male to express himself, to know that he can be safe with someone by showcasing his vulnerability. I'm not saying to express that particular side of yourself with just anyone and just everyone, but find someone where you feel safe, where your vulnerability feels safe, so that you can express yourself and know that it's okay to do so. And I think we have to do a better job at letting our Black men know we do care about how you're feeling. We do care about what's going on inside in your mental and your heart, because it's important. I think if that support is felt, we'll have more men who are emotionally stable or emotionally mature and can absolutely describe it and share how they are feeling. So I think we also have to do a better job at expressing that and making that okay as well. Before we go here, guys, got to get your final thoughts. So let's start off with you, AD.
So one thing I'd like to share, you're absolutely right, Lericia, and to be vulnerable takes courage. It's not that you're soft or you're a punk, but if you truly show your vulnerability, it takes courage for you to do this. And sometimes in being courageous, you're going to take some hits. So, you just got to be prepared for that. My final thought and what I like to share with you, and I'm finna to go in a couple minutes because it's Cinco de Mayo, and I'm gonna go get some street tacos and a couple margaritas. So to all my Hispanic brothers and sisters, I'll be out there in a minute celebrating with you.
My final shot, Lericia, May 3rd, 1959. That's when my parents got married. If they were both living, they would have celebrated 62 years of marriage on Monday. You know, and me and my wife been married 20 years. I never heard my parents argue. And the best advice my parents gave me, they said, Leonard, you're not going to like everything about Thais. She ain't going to like everything about you. So just understand that going in. And if you remember that, y'all marriage will be well. Best advice I ever had. So rest in power, Mom and Dad. I miss y'all.
That is absolutely
beautiful. Could I add one more thing? So how do you think this divorce is going to come with our Microsoft folks? I mean, they have property in California and I think Washington too. And so it looks like it's going to be split right down the middle. Going to be hard to split.
More money, more problems, brother.
Hey, it's going to be hard to split $170 billion.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? That's it for today's show, you all. We greatly appreciate everyone tuning in and watching. I hope y'all enjoyed my new tribal braids I got going on here. I try to be cute for y'all. No, I'm just kidding. But again, we thank you all for joining us for another episode of Fourth and Just Us. Don't forget, you can like us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and always leave us your comments and your questions. We want to make sure we address them at any time. So again, thank you for watching. We'll see you next week.
Awesome.